What are the most powerful countries on the planet?
Well, you're about to find out.
I'm going to rank the 11 most powerful countries based on their geopolitical strength. I'm going to be looking at their economy, their geography, their military to determine where they belong in my geopolitical tier list. I'll be handing out bonus points for nuclear weapons and aircraft carriers. So without further ado, let's start the f***ing video. Okay, let's start with Japan, the land of the rising sun. Once a great empire fighting for justice and equality, but since its World War II fiasco it's been reduced to a second-rate power. In terms of population size, it's 11th in the world with 124 million people, just below Mexico. That alone means it cannot be a superpower. How can you go head to head with China if you have 1/10 of the population? But obviously, population size is not everything.
Geography.
In terms of its geography, Japan has the benefit of being an island nation, which means that it is protected by the East China Sea and the Pacific. Its enemies can't just invade with tanks and artillery. They have to build a huge amphibious capability in order to even think about invading the Japanese islands. And even then, it's relatively easy to defend against ships from land. So Japanese geography is definitely superior. But with that being said, its biggest enemies, North Korea and China, are Japan's neighbors.
Economy.
In terms of its economy, it recently lost its position as the third largest economy globally to its former World War II ally Germany. But fourth is not that bad actually. It has a GDP of 4.1 trillion. That's larger than the Indian economy or that of France or Britain. So Japan is definitely at the big boys table when it comes to its economy. But when it comes to its military, Japan is not the strongest kid on the block.
Military.
For decades, Japan has neglected its armed forces, mainly because of its pacifist attitude since its World War II fiasco. But the forces that it does have are considered to be amongst the best trained and most well-equipped armed forces on the planet. Very versatile, like a Swiss Army knife or that scary drill that dentists use to make sure you don't come back next year. Anyway, time for the bonus round.
Bonus round.
Does Japan have nukes? No. Does Japan have aircraft carriers? Yes, it does actually. Japan has two relatively new Izumo-class aircraft carriers that will eventually be able to carry F-35 jets on its deck. Very nice.
They're nice.
I want to place Japan on the B tier, but it just doesn't have the military capabilities necessary, so I'm gonna place it in the C tier. Moving on to my next victim, Germany. The home of the pretzel, Angela Merkel, and the guy that ordered the mass production of this car. Where do I even start with Germany? It lost both world wars and initiated one of them. Germany ranks 19th in terms of population, just below Iran, with a total population size of 84 million.
Geography.
In terms of its geography, Germany has been dealt some of the worst cards imaginable. Its southern border is relatively well secured, with the Alps protecting it from any incursion by the Swiss. Because God knows what the Swiss are up to with their strange cheese with holes in it. But up north, Germany has no natural barriers. The northern European plains are basically a tank highway. Whether it's the Americans invading from the west or the Soviets invading from the east, foreign armies can just march in anytime they want. Moving on to the German economy.
Economy.
Now this is where the Germans really shine. Germany has the third largest economy in the world with a GDP of 4.6 trillion. The country is best known for its automotive industry that includes brands like BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Lamborghini, Bentley, all kinds of brands that haven't even been founded in Germany. But it's also a very big player in other industries like chemicals and machinery. But considering that industrial might, you would expect Germany to have a relatively large defense sector. But unfortunately, the German defense sector isn't as large as you would expect it to be, especially not compared to World War II defense industry. The only German defense company that's ranked globally within the top 20 is Rheinmetall, which occupies the 19th spot, which is not that impressive. For the Germans at least. You would expect them, especially since their World War II dominance, you would expect them to have a bit of a stronger defense sector, but they don't.
Military.
When it comes to the German military, there's not much to say. The German military is nothing compared to the size it once was. With its large industrial base, Germany should be capable of building a much larger military-industrial complex. But since its World War II debacle, it chose to focus more on economic development instead, with America providing, through NATO, a military or defense umbrella, so Germany could just focus on building better cars, better products, instead of stronger military capabilities. Okay, time for the bonus round.
Bonus round.
Does Germany have nukes? No, it doesn't. Does it have aircraft carriers? It has none. With that out of the way, I'm gonna place Germany in the D tier. Such a shame. It could have scored so much higher. But yeah, let's move on to the next country. The home of vodka and communism, the Russian Federation. But wait, make sure you like the video if you're actually enjoying the video, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos. Okay, let's move on. The Russian Federation has a total population of 147 million, which puts it on the 9th spot, just below Bangladesh. But unlike Bangladesh, Russia is huge. Even though we all know size doesn't matter. What?
Geography.
Russia is the largest country on the planet in terms of land area. But from a geopolitical perspective, that land area is both a blessing and a curse. A large land area comes with a lot of resources and a lot of opportunities. Russia benefits immensely from its large size. Russia borders China and North Korea while also bordering the European countries. It's such a vast country. But a large land area also has its downsides. It's basically impossible to defend such a large country. If Russia is attacked from multiple fronts, it's going to be basically impossible to defend all of its borders. But that's where its nuclear deterrent comes in. But we'll talk about that in the bonus round.
Economy.
Russia's economy ranks 11th globally, just behind Canada. It's a pretty backwards economy in my opinion. The extraction of fossil fuels and minerals is responsible for the largest share of the Russian economy. John McCain once described Russia as a gas station masquerading as a country. I could not have thought of a better way to describe the Russian economy. There's not a lot of innovation happening in Russia. When was the last time you held a Russian product in your hand? For me, the last time was when I was holding a Kalashnikov during a Saudi wedding, shooting it up in the air. Here's some footage of me shooting an AK-47 in the air during a wedding.
Military.
Now this is where Russia really shines. The Russian Federation has a standing army of 1.3 million active personnel, plus 2 million in reserve. It has military bases spread out across Eurasia. And let's not forget about Wagner, which is becoming increasingly powerful, especially in Africa, in the Sahel region. Even though Prigozhin, its leader, was recently blown out of the air by Vladimir Putin, it's still a force to be reckoned with. That's how I want to die, by the way, being blown out of the air by a dictator. Russia's armed forces are the strongest in Europe. They could take over Poland in a heartbeat. But with that being said, let's move on to the bonus round.
Bonus round.
Does Russia have nukes? Yes, it does. It actually has more nuclear weapons than any other country on the planet. It could destroy the whole planet and cause a nuclear winter if it wanted to. Russia gets 1 billion bonus points for its nuclear arsenal. Does it have aircraft carriers? Yes, it does. The Russian Navy has one aircraft carrier, a Kuznetsov-class aircraft carrier, but it has been undergoing maintenance since 2018. It's known for being the most unreliable aircraft carrier on the planet. It breaks down at the most inconvenient moments. And unlike the American aircraft carriers that use nuclear power to propel themselves forward, the Russian Kuznetsov-class uses diesel. Russia gets half a point for its Lada aircraft carrier. I'm going to put Russia in the B tier, but only because of its nuclear arsenal, which is doing most of the heavy lifting. Moving on to the United Kingdom, the land of tea, the royal family, and Jeremy Clarkson. With a population of 67 million, it's one of the smallest countries on the list. But what it lacks in population size, it makes up for in obedience to the United States. The UK is known for following the United States around like a puppy. But for a small puppy, it makes a lot of noise. The UK is part of NATO, G7, AUKUS, and a lot of other platforms and alliances. It was once known as the empire on which the sun never set. Now it's known as Europe's anus. As you might have guessed, I'm not a big fan of the British. Since the British left the European Union, I somehow have been holding this grudge that I can't let go of. It's like they broke up with me personally. Am I not enough?
Geography.
In terms of its geography, the United Kingdom enjoys a lot of benefits similar to Japan. It's surrounded by ocean, it's surrounded by water, which provides a nice, comfortable cocoon for the British to drink tea and just lay back.
Economy.
From an economic perspective, the United Kingdom is a pretty big deal. They rank 6th overall in terms of GDP. Very impressive for a country that ranks 21st globally in terms of population. London is the second largest financial center in the world, second only to Wall Street. But things haven't been going great recently. The economy is either shrinking or barely growing. London is about to lose its status as a large financial center. And all of that just because it decided to leave the European Union.
Military.
The British military is okay, I guess. It's capable of projecting power across the globe. It famously kicked Argentina's ass during the Falkland War, all the way on the other side of the globe. The UK has all the latest advanced military gadgets, but it just doesn't have the size it needs to win a global war. It's not the empire it once was. With that being said, let's move on to
Bonus round.
bonus round. Yes, it does, 225 to be precise. But they're only deployed on its submarines, unlike other countries that have the full triad of delivery methods. Quick detour, the nuclear triad is the capability to launch nuclear weapons from multiple platforms. First one is submarines, second one is from an aircraft, and the third one would be ground-based, so intercontinental ballistic missiles or any other kind of missile. Actually, it doesn't have to be intercontinental. The UK has two brand spanking new Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers capable of carrying up to 35 F-35s. I wonder if they chose the amount of aircrafts based on the amount of confusion they can sow. But yeah, 35 F-35 aircraft carriers. 35 F-35 planes can be carried on its Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carrier. That's what I wanted to say. But the Queen Elizabeth class is not propelled by a nuclear power, unlike the Americans again, but instead they use gas turbines. I guess that's better than Russia's diesel aircraft carrier. I'm going to place the UK in the B tier. It's a solid country, it just doesn't have the size, the girth to be a solid superpower. Even though size doesn't matter. We all know size doesn't matter.
India.
On to India, the land of Pani Puri, Modi and Shah Rukh Khan. The most populous country on the planet with 1.4 billion people. That's more than all of Africa combined. It's the future superpower that everyone wants to be friends with. Obviously, the land of my favorite cuisine has to rank high. But can it claim the top spot? Let's see.
Geography.
Starting with its geography, India has a lot of natural barriers that make it really hard for foreign powers to invade. It's protected by the Indian Ocean from the south and the Himalayas from the north that keep the Chinese from trying to invade and orchestrating a land grab. We all know it's a matter of time before the Chinese start looking for some Lebensraum. Its border with Bangladesh is less safe, but then again the Bangladeshis have much better things to do than trying to invade its much larger neighbor. The only big threat comes from the Pakistani side, where Pakistan stationed nuclear weapons that are permanently aimed at New Delhi.
Economy.
Moving on to the Indian economy. India has a GDP of 4 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but when you take the size of its population into consideration, it's nothing to write home about. But with that being said, India's economy is booming. It's the fastest growing large economy in the world. It's a matter of time before India dominates the global economy, especially since China's demographics are starting to look really ugly.
Military.
In terms of its military strength, India's largest asset is its population size. Every year, 23 million people reach military age. 23 million per year. That's almost as much as the total population of Australia. India could just overwhelm enemies with waves of humans. The same way the Soviets did that during World War II. India doesn't really have the strong military-industrial complex to build a strong, independent military. But it does have that cool-looking BrahMos missile with air intakes that look like shark gills. Moving on to
Bonus round.
India has 172 nuclear weapons. But then again, Pakistan has exactly the same amount of nuclear weapons. So they kind of cancel each other out. Yes, it does actually. It has two of them, one homegrown and one refurbished Soviet Kiev-class aircraft carrier. Plus, India is planning to build another one, which is supposed to be commissioned before the end of the 2020s. So it has nukes, it has aircraft carriers, 1.4 billion people. If it also had a large economy, I would say it would go straight to S tier. But it just lacks that economic power. So I'm going to place it in the A tier. Moving on to the land of Jackie Chan, Peking Duck and Mao Zedong. Like India, China has 1.4 billion people, but unlike India, China has the economic power to match those numbers.
Geography.
Let's start with its geography. From the east, China is protected by the East China Sea, while on the western side, it's protected by the Himalayas and the Gobi Desert. China's biggest weak point is Manchuria, which is kind of like the Northern European plains. It just doesn't have any natural barriers. Foreign enemies can just sprint across it and invade. That's where the Japanese forces invaded in the 1930s. So its geography, from a geopolitical perspective, is not perfect, but it's not that bad either.
Economy.
From an economic perspective, there's not much to say. China is a behemoth. They have competitive companies in every industry, except for the one that really matters. Its GDP of 18.5 trillion is second only to the United States. But that's if you look at its nominal value, which we've been doing for every country until now. When you consider purchasing power parity, China's economy is number one in the world, by far, with 35 trillion. So its economy gets a 10 out of 10.
Military.
China's military is also top-notch. It has a solid military industrial base. It produces most weapons that it would need in a war. Even the most advanced ones like 5th generation fighters, hypersonic missiles and intercontinental ballistic missiles. It has a solid space program. There's not much else to say. China's military is top-notch. No one would ever dare to invade the Chinese mainland. 10 out of 10. On to the
Bonus round.
Yes, obviously China has nukes. You can't be a superpower without having nuclear weapons. They have at least 500 of them, and recently Xi Jinping announced that China would be expanding its military arsenal. So who knows how much they're going to have in 10 years from now. China gets 50 billion points for its nuclear arsenal. Yes, it does actually, 3 aircraft carriers, and it's planning to build a 4th one, which is going to be its first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. With that being said, China belongs in S tier. There's no hesitation from my side. Well done, China. Say hi to Jackie Chan, by the way. Moving on to France, my former colonial overlord. Known for its great cuisine, Napoleon Bonaparte, and the Paris Syndrome. For its size, it packs a hell of a punch. It's 20th in terms of population, with 68 million people. Not the largest, but it's big enough to sustain itself to some degree on the international stage. For continental power, France has amazing geography. It's mostly surrounded by water, the Pyrenees protected from the Spanish and the Alps protected from the Italians and the Swiss. The only real weak point that borders a major power is the Rhine River Valley that borders Germany. Which is what the Maginot Line was supposed to compensate for during World War II. But the Germans were too smart, they just used tiny Belgium as a stepping stone to reach Paris. It's not like the Belgians have anything to say about that.
Economy.
Moving on to the French economy, again, for its size, the French have a solid economy. They have competitive companies in every sector, basically. In the automotive industry, they're leading the pack with the Citroën C4. Look at it, it's like something that the Germans would have made in 2001. How did they ever think that this car would sell? Okay, maybe not that competitive in the automotive sector. Okay, maybe they're more competitive in the fashion industry. The French are known to be good at fashion, right? LVMH is the most valuable fashion conglomerate on the planet, and they just started selling a new bag. Let's take a look. What the fuck is that?
Brother,
And that thing costs more than $3,000. Yeah, anyway, I don't know what they do, but the French have a solid economy. 6 out of 10.
Military.
Okay, moving on to the French military. Like the UK, France has quite a large and capable military. It's still capable of projecting power across the globe, all the way into the Pacific even, where it has a couple of islands. It doesn't operate as savvy as it used to, and it's increasingly losing its strategic positions across the globe, most notably in the Sahel region, where Russia's Wagner military mercenary group is taking over in all kinds of countries. But that doesn't mean France is weak. On the contrary, France arguably has the strongest military on the European continent. They have a strong military-industrial complex, which produces everything from fighter jets to intercontinental ballistic missiles, tanks, and all kinds of other capabilities that you need as a strong, modern military. So the French armed forces get an 8 out of 10. Moving on to the
Bonus round.
bonus round. Yes, it does actually, 290 of them, enough to destroy most of Europe. But unlike the British, they can also launch them from their aircrafts. The only thing that's missing to build a full triad are the land-based missiles. France doesn't have intercontinental ballistic missiles. They do have the capability to build them, but I guess they just don't see the need to build them for now. With that being said, France belongs in the B tier. Moving on to the land of lahmacun, Erdogan and sunflower seeds. In terms of population, Turkey is the largest country in Europe with 85 million inhabitants. That's if you don't consider Russia. I never really know where to place Russia. Yes, Moscow and St. Petersburg are European cities, but Russia also borders China. Let's just call it a Eurasian power. But let's go back to Turkey for a second. Let's start with its geography.
Geography.
With the Anatolian Peninsula straddling Europe and Asia, Turkey has one of the most strategically important locations in Europe, basically. That's why it's part of NATO, not because it's culturally very similar to Western Europe or the United States, but because of its geographically strategic position. Also, let's not forget that Turkey controls access to the Black Sea through the Bosphorus Strait, which makes it essential to countries on the Black Sea. And especially to Russia, whose two most important warm water ports, Novorossiysk and Sevastopol, are located on the Black Sea.
Economy.
The Turkish economy is 18th in the world with a GDP of 1.1 trillion. Nothing to write home about, especially for a country of 85 million people. Inflation has been causing big troubles for the Turks in recent years. But then again, it still has a $1 trillion economy, so it gets a 6 out of 10. In terms of its military, Turkey punches well above its weight. It has the largest standing army in Europe, it has the second largest in NATO, second only to the United States, and it has a fast growing and capable military-industrial complex. They famously make the Bayraktar drone, which has proven to be very effective, especially within its price point, and Turkey also makes tanks and fighter jets and other high-tech equipment. Its military gets a 8 out of 10. Moving on to the
Bonus round.
bonus round. No, it doesn't. But it does have an aircraft carrier commissioned in 2023, the Anadolu, built in Istanbul but based on Spain's Juan Carlos I. With that being said, considering Turkey's impressive military, I'm going to put it in the C tier. If it had nukes or a much larger economy, I would have put it in the B tier. But yeah, it is what it is. On to the next one. Moving on to my favorite country, North Korea, the land of Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Il-sung. I don't know what else they have to offer besides crazy dictators with weird haircuts. With a population of 24 million, it's by far the smallest country on the list, but since it's my favorite country, I'm gonna include it anyway. Let's start by looking at its geography. On the northern side, North Korea borders China along the Yalu River and Russia along the Tumen River. There's no significant natural barriers on the northern side except for the mountain range that includes Mount Paektu. Kim Jong-il was supposedly born on top of Mount Paektu in the middle of the night in the freezing cold on a secret military encampment, and the moment he was born, the clouds split up like Moses split them up, and a new star appeared that became the brightest in the sky. Well, I believed him. If you don't believe him, that's your problem, but I believed him. Sounds very plausible to me. Moving on to the North Korean economy, it's small, it's tiny, you would need a magnifying glass to see it. In fact, it's smaller than the Yemeni economy. South Korea's economy is 100 times the size of the North Korean economy. Its military, on the other hand, is quite large, with 1.3 million in active personnel, but they are very poorly equipped. But what else can you expect from a country with such a small economy? They have a lot of basic stuff like mortar shells and AK-47s, but yeah, not sure if you can win a war with that. Moving on to the bonus round.
Bonus round.
North Korea has no aircraft carriers, but it does have around 50 nuclear weapons, which is enough to deter its enemies from trying anything stupid. North Korea also has intercontinental ballistic missiles that are capable of reaching the United States mainland. So yeah, I don't think anyone would ever want to f with the North Koreans. I'm placing them in the C tier, right next to Turkey. Moving on to Iran. Quick disclaimer though, before we start, to have a bit of a weak spot for Iran because of its history, the Persian Empire. Come on, who doesn't love the Persian Empire? Not a lot of countries can claim to have the history that the Persians have. Maybe the Egyptians. Maybe. Well, the Egyptians do actually. It's home to my second favorite cuisine after the Indian one. Did I mention that during the Indian section? I'm sure I did. And it's home to Mr. Taster, my favorite foodie on the planet. Maybe one day I'll get to meet Mr. Taster. A man can dream. Iran has around 90 million inhabitants, which is larger than Turkey or Germany, but not as large as Russia. But it's a sizable country. In terms of its geography, Iran is neatly positioned between the Persian Gulf and the Caspian Sea. On the western side, it's protected by the Zagros Mountains, and on the eastern side, multiple mountain ranges where it borders Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's perfectly cocooned in between geographic features that protect it from the outside powers. Throughout history, this has allowed for a stable environment for rich civilizations to flourish, hence the rich history, culture, cuisine.
Economy.
Iran's economy has been crippled by sanctions since the 1979 revolution, which has caused it to be much smaller than it should be. Iran has a large, well-educated population. The Persians are very entrepreneurial, hard-working. If it wasn't for all the sanctions, Iran would have had a much larger economy. But for now, with a GDP of 460 billion, it ranks 34th globally.
Military.
The Iranian military is quite impressive for the size of its economy, to be honest. Iran is the largest player in the Middle East, with Iraq, Lebanon and Syria basically being puppet states of Iran. Through the Revolutionary Guards Corps, it has the capability to project power across the globe, basically. But more importantly, Iran's military-industrial complex has the capability of churning out a lot of cheap but effective weapons, despite all of the crippling sanctions that I just mentioned. A great example of that is the Shahed drone, which costs 20k to produce and which is really proven to be really effective in Russia's campaign in Ukraine.
Bonus round.
Iran doesn't get any bonus points since it doesn't have aircraft carriers and it doesn't have nuclear weapons. But Iran has a solid nuclear industry, and according to some sources, it would take Iran 2 weeks to build a bomb if it chose to do so. So no, it doesn't have nuclear weapons, but since it has the capability to produce them very fast, it does count for something. With that being said, I'm going to place Iran in the C tier. It would have belonged in the B tier if it had a much larger economy or if it had nuclear weapons. But yeah, it is what it is. The United States, I saved the best for last. Finally time to address the elephant in the room. What can I say about the United States? It has nearly perfect geography from a geopolitical perspective. It has oceans on both sides, and to the north and south it has smaller and friendly neighbors, more importantly. It has the largest military on the planet with bases spread out across all continents. It has the largest and most advanced economy on the planet. Any technology you can think of, the Americans either invented it or have the capability of producing it locally. It's the top dog. There's no country like the United States. It's the definition of a superpower. So I'm not going to spend much time on the United States. It definitely belongs in the S tier. So yeah, there you have it. I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe. See you in the next one.